9 years ago, because it was a Wednesday, not a Sunday, and because I'd only ever worshiped in this space, and because it had been a very long day, and because I had only been here for maybe a week or two, I wore a hat in the sanctuary during a business meeting. Who gasped? You gasped. Thank you. Thank you. Because if you're not gasping, or at least just shaking a little bit, then you don't grasp the severity of the situation. I wore a hat in the sanctuary. I was honestly surprised that I was not escorted out by a committee and asked to hand over my church keys right on the spot. The email I got was the equivalent of like being accused of having showed up naked to a wedding, essentially. And I never wore a hat in the sanctuary again. I'll tell you that in good fun, but I think many of us, I grew up going to church with my grandma. And I grew up thinking that church meant strictness and seriousness all the time, right? You be quiet, and you sit still, and you don't laugh too loudly, and you don't ask too many questions, and you don't squeak any frogs. And if you were a kid, you were expected to be a very serious kid. How do you still have one? I have a funny story about these frogs, maybe for another day. What I've learned, though, is that the sacred, he just keeps pulling out frogs. This is like I just keep thinking of like the Exodus story, and I might have nightmares about these, to be honest with you. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh. Well, here's the point that this is all tying into, and it's good for us to realize this. Sacred things, even squeaky frogs, don't fit into neat boxes. We can enjoy the fact that our church is covered in frogs, and I didn't hide them. Someone else did. I don't want to take credit for someone else's work, or how upset some of you are that there's squeaky frogs everywhere. Anyway, all right. Sacred things are not always strict things. And the Bible is full of stories and poems and silly things and surprises and bawdy poetry and hyperbolic parables and exaggerations. And so as I was trying to figure out what are we going to do with these kids up here, I thought maybe we can just all ask a question like, what if there's times in the Bible when we're allowed to laugh? I love laughing. I've told this story a few times, but I was told in the 7th grade that I have a very dry sense of humor, and I've tried to lean into that my entire life. But what my English teacher meant was probably that I just wasn't as funny as I thought I actually was, and that was her nice way of telling me that. Humor often arises from the gap between what we expect and what actually happens. Whether that is a sloth working at the DMV, a highly trained policeman whose only job is to track down a goose, whatever's going on there from Arrested Development, or the world's most popular doll having an existential crisis. The technical term for this is incongruity. Two things that don't seem to go together suddenly collide, and the surprise of their collision makes us question or think or stop and sometimes even laugh. And the Bible is filled with stories like that. The Bible has a story where a giant gets felled by a boy with a slingshot, where a bush burns without being consumed, where the creator of the universe arrives as a baby laid in a manger, and his first crib might have possibly been a feeding trough. Again and again, Scripture shows us that God's ways rarely fit our expectations. Yet, most of us adults are not as curious about these interruptions as we are frustrated by them because we spend much of our lives organizing ourselves around predictability. We make plans, we set goals, and we create schedules for both ourselves and for our families, some of us at our jobs. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what happens is that we can subtly develop routines that keep us so distracted by predicting and practicing outcomes that we become strangers to awe, strangers to wonder. And life's surprising moments remind us that we don't have everything figured out. And sometimes we have to take the time to make sure we make room for those things in our lives. And if we don't, sometimes they appear in weird ways. Today's story can be found in Numbers chapter 22. That's on page 123 if you'd like to follow along. I'm going to be kind of going through the story, not necessarily verse by verse, but if you want to read along, you can follow along. And today's story is about a man named Balaam. Balaam, in this story, he seems pretty important. He's a kind of I like to think of him as a prophet for hire. He's a religious consultant. He's the kind of person that kings call when they need help from heaven. In our modern language, we might just, I like what I did here, at least, an attempt at humor. Blessings and curses on demand. Some restrictions may apply. Right away, having anyone with a card that says expert religious consultant should probably give us pause. Should make us a little cautious, because whenever spirituality becomes something that people can buy or schedule or use for personal gain, things get a little complicated. So in this story, there's a king. His name is Balak. And he's the leader of a people called the Moabites. And he is terrified of the Israelites because they just had a really big victory. And they're growing stronger, and they're impossible to ignore. So Balak decides to hire our expert religious consultant, Balaam. And he sends a message. He says, "Come curse these people for me because they are stronger than I am. Maybe then I'll be able to defeat them," says the king of the Moabites. So Balaam asked God what he should do. And God says, "You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." Simply put, the answer is no. And that should have settled the matter. The conversation should be over. The case should be closed. But then more money appears, and more influence appear, and important people show up, and peer pressure and opportunity take over. And suddenly, all of a sudden, Balaam starts to wonder if the answer really is no after all. He makes a statement that seems very spiritual. "Even if Balak gave me a house full of silver or gold, I couldn't go beyond the command of the Lord my God." That sounds good, right? But then he adds, "Well, stay here tonight and I'll see what more God might have to say." That little word "more" is where the trouble begins. Sometimes, just like little kids, we keep asking because we secretly hope the answer that we've already received will change. Not because we didn't hear the answer the first time, but because we didn't like it. Verse 20. That night, God tells Balaam he may go, but it's not really permission in the way that he wants or thinks. God says, "If the men have come to summon you, get up and go with them, but do only what I tell you." It's almost like a parent saying, "Fine, go ahead, be careful, but keep your eyes open. Pay attention." And of course, Balaam misses that part altogether. He only hears what he wants. And it says, "So Balaam got up in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went." There's a rush to it, right? There's no reflection, no self-awareness. Balaam thinks he knows exactly where he's going, exactly how he's going to get there. He understands what's going to happen. He's a prophet for hire. This whole God thing's very predictable to him. He knows what his journey means, and in reality, though, he has no idea what is about to happen. And number tells us this: if this is ever anything that the Lord God says about you, you're in trouble. God's anger was kindled because he was going, and the angel of the Lord stood in the road as his adversary. Whoops. Picture the scene, okay? I read this numerous times this week. Balaam is riding his donkey. He's got two servants alongside him, and everything seems normal. And then the donkey suddenly sees something that Balaam cannot. He sees an angel, the angel of the Lord, standing in the road. The angel of the Lord is a little bit scarier. Now, I hate snakes, but a little bit scarier than a copperhead, in my opinion, right? This is not a precious moments angel. This isn't a bored, I had this vision of like a bored angel in like a high-vis vest standing there with like one of those stop-go signs. This is a you are in danger angel. This is an angel that is strapped, locked, and loaded and blocking the way. This is a you need to stop right now angel. And the donkey sees the angel, and he instantly turns off the road into a field. And Balaam notices none of this. All he sees is the donkey, and so he hits it. Ugh. The angel moves. And this time he's standing in the narrow path between these vineyard walls. And the donkey sees the angel and tries to squeeze by it. And Balaam's foot gets scraped against the wall. And he gets mad at the donkey for his foot getting scraped against the wall. And so he hits the donkey again. So the angel moves another time, and now the path is so narrow that there's nowhere to go. There's no room left to turn. There's no way to go left or right, and the donkey sees the angel, and it says, so the donkey simply sits down in the middle of the road. And Balaam loses his temper again. Now consider what's happening in this story. The creature attempting to save his life is the one that he's angry at. This is the first layer of humor in the story. This is irony, is what this type of humor is called. 3 times the donkey sees danger, and 3 times Balaam sees inconvenience. 3 times the donkey acts wisely. By the way, side note, I really wanted to use the KJV version of this story this morning, but because the children were here, I didn't. But like, it would have made this so much more funny. Anyway, so insert words as you might want to. The donkey acts wisely, and 3 times Balaam gets angry. And many of us know what that feel like. We've all had moments where our plans were interrupted, and well, I'll keep that to myself, but something slows us down. Something gets in our way. Sometimes it's a minor inconvenience. But we've all had times where it happened, and then we got lost in the spiral of, well, why is this happening to me? Why me? Why did this happen to me? We'll come back to that. This is where the story takes kind of a wonderfully absurd turn, though. Okay, recap. Donkey sees the angel, tries to get away, gets hit, sees the angel, tries to get away, gets hit. 3 times, okay? Can't get Balaam's attention. Okay, are you listening to this part of the story? The Lord opens the donkey's mouth, and the donkey speaks. And it's not with like a prophecy or dramatic poetry. It's just a simple question. The donkey says, what have I done to you that you've hit me these 3 times? The donkey just goes, yo, stop hitting me. Why are you hitting me? I can't do an Eddie Murphy voice, or I would, but I probably shouldn't. But imagine that. Imagine your dog was like, hey, just so you know, you're going to get in trouble if you do that, what would you do? Yeah, I would keep him too. You're talking. Well, imagine this. Like, Balaam doesn't go, whoa, you can talk? I've only known 3 other talking donkeys in my life, right? No, he doesn't seem to get it. He doesn't say, hey, can you explain to me how all of a sudden you acquired the skill of speech? Instead, he argues back with the donkey. The donkey says, hey, why are you hitting me? And he says, because you've made me a fool, and if I had a sword, I'd kill you right now. This is in the Bible, you guys. There has been worse. There is. You are correct. This impossible thing happens, and yet Balaam treats it like it's no big deal because he's so focused on his own frustration. He's so frustrated on this interruption that he doesn't seem to even care that his donkey is talking to him. Then the donkey asks a surprisingly reasonable question. Am I not your donkey? Haven't you ridden me your whole life? Have I ever behaved this way before? And Balaam says, no. You know what? You haven't. And this is kind of the real reversal of the story, and a lot of humor comes from the role of reversing expectations. The donkey is the wise one, and the prophet is utterly clueless. The donkey sees reality, and the prophet misses it completely because insight, real, genuine wisdom, begins not with having all the answers figured out, but remaining alert to the possibility that there is more happening in the present than we are aware of. And so finally, the scripture says, then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam. At last, he sees the angel, sword drawn, standing in the road, and he realizes the truth of his situation. He thought he was making progress while he was actually walking straight into danger. The angel says, the donkey saw me and turned away 3 times. If it had not done so, I would have killed you and let the donkey live. Which is a reversal of what Balaam just threatened the donkey with, right? No, you know who wouldn't have gotten out of this situation? You. And this 4-legged guy would be on his way. This is another layer of it, because Balaam isn't just brought down low, the donkey is lifted up. The animal sees what the prophet cannot. The overlooked one becomes the wise one, and just as a little taste of foreshadowing, the one being struck becomes the one doing the saving. Again, the person with the highest status isn't always the one with the clearest vision. The loudest voice isn't always the wisest. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks sees the situation most clearly. This story invites us to laugh, and not at Balaam himself, but at the surprising ways that God can work, even through the mystery of a talking donkey. Repeatedly, the Bible tells stories of people looking in one direction while God shows up somewhere else. The younger sibling instead of the older one. The shepherd instead of the king. The outsider instead of the insider. Almost as if it's suggesting that this is really how God works after all. God has never been limited to the places we expect to find God. And if that's the case, then maybe we should expect to find God in the voices we would normally choose to ignore. In the perspectives or the questions that arrive from those people that we would never expect to be able to carry that kind of clarity. But those kinds of questions leave us a little bit unsettled. Yet Scripture shows us repeatedly that God speaks in strange voices like those of a donkey. What do you think a donkey sounds like when he talks? I had to do it. I like that one, Lucas. That's a good one. Or the voice of children, the voice of strangers. Again and again, the Bible seems willing to embarrass our assumptions. It reveals the absurdity of our desire to get truth from one particular expected outcome, because the clearest and clearest voice in the room is not always the one we are listening for. We have to begin to notice how limited our expected sources of wisdom really are. Now, why is this happening to me is the question that comes up. Like, why does this donkey keep moving out of the way? Why can't he just stay on the path, right? Why did I get a flat tire today? Why did this happen to me? Most of us know what it feels like when a door closes, a plan falls apart, a schedule changes, or something slows us down. I think we can admit that our first reaction generally is not to ask, what if this interruption is actually protecting me from something? Or at least, what if something else is going on here? This doesn't mean, I want to say this, we can't make these big blanket statements from one story in the Bible. Not every painful experience is secretly good. Okay? Sometimes pain is real and life is hard. Not everything is going to work out because we're not paying attention. Sometimes we just get side-slammed. Not every painful experience is secretly good. Life is far more complicated than that. But what this does show us is that we may not always be the best judges of our own urgency. We rush towards goals. We assume that speed equals progress. We treat any kind of resistance as failure, and sometimes we end up realizing that we are flat out wrong and we've made the wrong choice. So, here's my question for us today, church. We all know what church can become when protecting what we already know becomes our highest value. We know what that can look like. But what if the church is meant to be a community of holy curiosity? A growing attentiveness to an expectation for where God may be moving next. We don't need to make a mausoleum to our assumptions and expectations. We need to be a place where there's life happening. A place of holy curiosity. This week, might I suggest that when something frustrates your sense of timing or interrupts the direction you thought you were going, before labeling it as a problem, just maybe quietly, honestly ask, what am I supposed to notice here? And maybe it's just some beautiful mountains. I'm glad that I said that out loud. Sometimes God helps us do that through silly reminders that reality is bigger than we think. We can laugh at ourselves. We can become more teachable, more open, and more willing to grow. And if we never laugh at ourselves, it becomes very hard to change. So when you find yourself in your Balaam moment this week, whether your donkey talks or not, whether your donkey is a donkey or not, frustrated, blocked, convinced, whatever, may the question not be, why is this happening to me? But why am I taking myself so seriously? God, who loves Balaam enough to stop him before he harms himself, even when Balaam is stubborn, even when he's overconfident, and even when he gets absolutely everything wrong, God still loves Balaam enough to interrupt his path, and sometimes that interruption looks strange before it looks loving. By the end of the story, Balaam tells Balak, the word God puts in my mouth, that is what I must say. And for the next chapter, there's 3 different times where they have this conversation, and he speaks on behalf of God. And I don't think he could have gotten there unless he had been humbled, slowed down, and awakened in this story. So, kiddos, what do you think it would mean for us to pay attention more? Who should we pay attention to more? Who? Me? No, that's not a good. Parents might be good.
Teachers, summer camp leaders.
Summer camp leaders.
Teachers at school.
Teachers at school. God. What did say what? Interruptions. What kind of interruptions?
Like
Holy interruptions?
interruption like that.
Do you like it? Do you like it when you have a plan and then all of a sudden your mom and dad said, actually, we have to hold on like 30 minutes? No, not even you, right? Church, I have some questions for you too. Whatever your age, you're good. When you find yourself moving quickly, convinced you understand the road ahead, I want you to hear these final questions as an invitation. Question number 1. What would it look like to move through the world assuming and expecting that there is more happening than you presently realize? That you can see, or that you might even expect? What would happen if you just opened up a little bit to be like, maybe I don't know all the answers? That's a tough one for me. Just as tough as this. What voices have you ignored because they arrive from unexpected places? What wisdom have you discounted because of the source? And this final one is for us. It's the big question that I've been sitting with all week. What would it mean to organize our lives not around control, not around guaranteed outcomes, but around a deep trust that God is still capable of surprising us? What might that look like? The challenge of Balaam's story for all of us is that sometimes the hardest things to see are the things that are right in front of us. That sometimes we become so focused on where we are going that we miss what God might be trying to show us along the way. And maybe that's where the holy laughter and the silly sacredness in this story reside. Not in a God who enjoys making our lives difficult, but in a God who loves us enough to interrupt us when we cannot see clearly. Even if it takes a talking donkey to do it, right? Sometimes the mercy of God is not found in removing every obstacle, but in helping us finally notice what we've been missing the whole time. Hey, would you pray with me?